Greetings, Starfighters. Sorry about the 5 o'clock shadow here, but today I went in to edit the video intro for Season 5, Episode 4 of Shameless Cashgrab for the film Lady Gangster, and somehow the video that was saved onto the drive for this thing was only 14 seconds. Not sure how the heck that happened, so doing this little bit of a rush job because I want to get the movie watched this week so I can hopefully have the episode out next week and have the episode out before the election. Oh, please let the Tangerine Taint be voted out. Last regular episode of the season. Now you know why I shave all the time. Save the USPS. Lady Gangster. I already said that. Let's do this. Okay, after that incredibly long-winded intro, let's go ahead and start talking about Lady Gangster from 1942. Plot summary courtesy of the DVD case. Dot Burton had always dreamed of becoming an actress, but a chance liaison with a group of mob men leads her into a life of crime instead. When the gang pulls off a bank heist of $40,000, Dot is left to take the rap alone. Not long after landing in the clink, Dot joins in on a breakout scheme. Back on the outside, she learns that the gang is planning to snuff out the only man who has ever cared for her. Now Dot's only chance of redemption is to save him. That's mostly right. Before we hop in fully, I actually learned something while I was logging this film on my Letterboxd account. This movie is apparently a remake. Specifically of a Barbara Stanwyck film from just 9 years earlier, 1933, called Ladies They Talk About. Well, let it never be said the remake cycle has only been shortened this generation. Also, it turns out Jackie Gleason is in this. Yes, that Jackie Gleason. He plays the getaway car driver. Anyway, things get moving rapidly as immediately after the main credits, our lead character, Dot, has placed a fake call to the police about a man running amok with a knife, their words, before using a small dog as a prop for the purposes of aiding in a bank robbery. The one from the plot summary, of course. Also keep in mind this is $40,000 in 1942 money, although honestly, that's still more than I make in a year, so... In fact, the DVD summary did its job so well that all I can really add to the bank robbery scene at the start are details, such as the dog, which I already mentioned. Points for accuracy so far. This season has been, at best, a B- on that front. How Dot gets made by the police involves the dog, actually. Her cover story pretty much falls apart the second the detective investigating the bank robbery sees the dog's name tag, which Dot had not seen, so she ends up calling it a different name. I'm guessing the mobster stole the dog. The detective takes her in for questioning, and they keep pressing her even after she asks for a lawyer. I know this movie was made pre-Miranda, but still, that's not great. We go from this to a guy in an office who works in broadcasting named Kenneth, who is opining to a colleague about the incompetence of the DA, the one who was talking to Dot in the previous scene. Specifically, how this is apparently not the first bank holdup this town had seen recently, and so far Dot is the only arrest he's managed to make. Kenneth begins talking about this on his radio network, and the DA, Sitton, overhears this, and at the suggestion of advisor, agrees to work with Kenneth on the matter rather than pushing back against him for his negative opinions, inviting him to aid in the investigations. A few short scenes later, Dot and Kenneth are in the DA's office together, and we learn that Kenneth and Dot actually know each other previously. The banter between the two is easily the most natural I've seen all season. Not that the previous movies were necessarily terrible in the dialogue department. At worst, conversations would be just kind of meh, but still. I forgot to mention at the start that this film is based on a play, and I think that kind of comes through with a lot of the dialogue. Kenneth convinces Sinton to release Dot to his custody to stay at his place with his sister. Not sure that's actually how that works, but I'm just going to roll with it. Oh yeah, by the way, spoiler alert, I don't think we actually see Kenneth's sister in the movie at any point. Dot returns to the place she was staying to gather some possessions to go to Kenneth's house, and the old woman who owns the building welcomes her in and apologizes to Dot for having introduced her to the mobsters who'd left her to take the rap in the bank robbery. Speaking of, she goes to speak to them to get her cut of the money before going to Kenneth's, certain she wasn't followed by the police. Or rather, that she'd lost them. I mean, she was smart enough to assume that they were going to try and follow her, but anyway. She overhears the mobsters through the door talking about splitting her cut between the three of them, with only the driver objecting, saying they should leave her cut for her even if she winds up in jail. The police, it turns out, had followed her, though, or rather, I should say, had not lost track of her, and the mobsters get to work hiding the money from the bank heist. Well, two of them do anyway. The driver, who we learn is named Wilson, is clearly sweet on Dot and tells her not to worry. The mobsters make a break for it, with Dot saying she'll leave the way she came in since she doesn't believe they have anything on her. After they leave through the window, she waits, then goes to the hiding spot where they stash the money and takes all of it for herself. Well, they were getting ready to screw her over, so fair enough. She hides it somewhere else before going back to the DA's office, where she tries to tell Kenneth that she had gotten roped into the bank heist. He doesn't let her finish, though, and so when the DA comes back, she tells him herself, but refuses to give up any information on the men who'd recruited her, which she'd been trying to tell Kenneth she'd do, but he wouldn't let her finish, as I just mentioned. Boy, I really only caught that awkward grammar just now as I was reading that back from the script. Anyway, confessing to a crime out of spite is not something you hear very often. She didn't even try to get a deal first. This is where the prison portion of the film begins. And if you're expecting any Orange is the New Black references here, I never saw it, nor do I intend to. After Dot begins her sentence, we cut back to Kenneth in his office, and he admits that it was not terribly nice of him to not let her finish what she was trying to tell him during her confession. Gee, you think? After this, one of the mobsters goes to visit Dot in prison, dressed as a woman and pretending to be her sister. Somehow this scene manages to not be incredibly transphobic or homophobic in its execution. Granted, the concept of the scene is goofy enough on its face that it takes you out of an otherwise serious movie, but the makeup team on the film actually tried to make the head bank robber, given that it's just the three guys, I'm thinking I should just stop calling them mobsters, and his disguise look convincing rather than playing it for laughs. It doesn't entirely work, but points for effort, I guess. During this scene, a minor character introduced when Dot arrives at the prison, a deaf woman, watches them, and it turns out she reads lips pretty well, as she passes on the information she gleaned from Dot and the lead robber's conversation. See, he and his fellows were aware at this point that she had taken the money, and he went to try and convince her to tell them where she hid it. She tells him to get lost, that she knew they were planning to keep her cut, and that if he didn't leave, she'd pull the wig off and get him arrested right there. Though the question is begged, how did the deaf woman see what Dot was saying when Dot was facing away from her? I guess I can go ahead and put that one in the let it slide category. I'm not CinemaSins here, people. When Dot is talking to a friend she's made in prison at this point, I finally have a name for the lead robber. They might have said it earlier and I just missed it, but his name is Cary Wells. And it just hit me. So far, I've not noticed any dropped frames or lost sound so far in the movie. I'm kind of embarrassed it took me over half the movie to notice that, but that's a good thing. I'm glad at least one of these movies had a clean transfer. A montage to show months passing by happens, the clearest showing of the passage of time this whole DVD set, let alone this movie. We rejoin Kenneth, who is happy to finally receive a letter from Dot after months of her sending back his letters without reading them. There is a pretty effective, by 1940s standards anyway, edit that takes us from Kenneth in his office to him at the prison visiting Dot and telling her that he plans to help her go straight, as she had tried to tell him she was planning to do back in the DA's office, and he manages to get her a parole hearing. We cut to Dot and her friend, whose name I've forgotten, sorry, and Dot admits that at first she was simply playing on Kenneth's emotions to get out, but now she's coming around to seeing things his way. I kind of figured this was going to go this way. It's predictable, but not terribly so. I've certainly seen worse contrivances in much more recent films. The parole hearing does not go well, though, due to interference from one of the other inmates, the one that the deaf one was talking to specifically. This interference also causes Dot and Kenneth to turn on each other, and here things get complicated. Not hard to follow, but hard to describe without going into heavy spoilers. Though one part of it, the escape and Dot going to save Kenneth, was already in the summary. Although the summary actually got it backwards, she found out that he was in danger before she escaped, but a minor thing, I'm not going to complain about it. This sequence includes another car chase, much like the one from the last movie, but this time I can see what's happening, so that automatically makes it a better car chase. Also, one of the bad guys gets shot by the police, without a verbal warning and with his back turned, so that's kind of yikes. I mean, yes, this guy had nearly killed Ken, kidnapped Dot, and killed Wilson, but his back was turned, as I said, and his gun was in his pocket. Kind of amazed the censors of the time let that one slide. I mean, you'd think that the Hays Code would not necessarily want cops to be portrayed as trigger-happy morons. Well, actually, no, maybe they would have been okay with that, because this was like before the kind of the modern propaganda era. Anyway, random thoughts I had while watching the film. During the prison scenes, we get our third non-white person of the set. Yeah, she's a prisoner, but at least she has actual dialogue, and none of it super stereotypical. Speaking of the prison scenes, naturally they couldn't let anyone have non-styled hair. Why, that might give people the impression that prison isn't a great place. The rather meh fight scene kind of puts a damper on the climax, but I've seen worse. For the life of me, I cannot remember what the third bank robber's name was, or if they even said it on screen. While I stopped referring to the robbers as mobsters during the episode, the movie kept calling them that, which I suppose is what justified it being on this set. Final verdict? This movie's ultimate strength is its character interactions. The action scenes, the things most people would be coming to this kind of movie for, to be honest, are boring much of the time, but when people are talking to each other, it flows so naturally that several times I actually forgot to stop and take notes. On the dialogue front, at least, this is not just the best movie of the set, but the best one I've seen for this show in a while. Even minor characters with one line who don't get names don't sound forced. There's effort here. Though, admittedly, a few characters are a little over the top, but given the time when this movie was made, the fact that it's only a few is actually a plus. As for the rest, it's solid. Nothing spectacular. The set design is fine, the costumes are fine. Nothing really stands out in either a good or bad way. Not the best movie I've watched for this show, but definitely the one I'd most recommend to my viewers from this set, I mean. So, go ahead and tune in next time when we do the Season 5 wrap-up video. Though really, if you've watched every episode this season, you pretty much already know what the ranking is going to be. But at least show up to see what Season 6 is going to be. Oh yes, there will be a Season 6. Have fun, stay safe.